Hi guys, welcome to another video and to my gym. My name is Richard Seidlitz, aka Telum01, and I'm the owner of redpants.lol. Today I'm going to be talking about a couple pieces of the exhaust system on an Aston Martin V8 Vantage. I get asked quite often what the best ways are to make a V8 Vantage faster, and there are two main ways to do that, and one is add power and the other is reduce weight. You can do both at the same time, which is what I highly recommend because neither of them is going to be the end-all be-all solution, especially on our cars. It's going to take a lot of work and unfortunately a lot of money to make them quite a bit faster. The good news is you can get a bit of power out of them, and by doing a bunch of modifications, which aren't terrible, but you know, when you start doing these, they add up quite a bit, and you end up with a much more fun car to drive. The standard V8 Vantage is a good car. It's wonderful. The 4.3 liter feels underpowered because it doesn't have as much power as it could, and it's kind of heavy for its size. That's one of the reasons why I focus on weight, is it really does transform the car. But my first suggestion when anybody asks me how do you make the car faster is I give them two recommendations. One is change out the catalytic converters for high flow cats, and also to get the car tuned. These two things right off the bat are going to give you a decent amount of power. You can get 410 to 420-ish horsepower from the 4.3 liter. The 4.7, you're still looking at really good gains. You can get a good 440 horsepower with those. So what I have in front of me are the exhaust manifold and catalytic converter and O2 sensors from my 4.3 liter V8 Vantage. So let's start off with the exhaust manifold. This one is hard to justify on the 4.3 liter because it's expensive and it's a lot of work to install. I've had several people ask me for the installation guide for this part. I do have notes for it. It's one of those, it's on my list of things to do. I just haven't gotten around to it. It's also very difficult to install. So it's one of those very niche things where most people are not going to want to do this job. And I do apologize for taking forever to get it done. But my priority for the content that I build is what's going to do the most good for the most people. And unfortunately, this isn't it. I'll tell you why, but first let's go over this real quickly. First thing you're going to notice is that it does have these dents in it. These dents don't affect performance. They are there to make it easier to access the fasteners that hold the manifold onto the engine block. The section here where you can see it sort of puffs out, that's because these are double walled. So that's why the dents don't affect performance. The double walling acts as a built-in heat shield to make it less damaging. The heat from the exhaust manifold, which gets extremely hot, you can see the heat wear in certain areas. It's less damaging for the rest of the components in the engine bay. This is what's known as a 4-to-2 header, which is kind of unique because generally it would be a 4-to-2-to-1. The other kind is a 4-to-1 manifold. And what that refers to is the runners, which are the individual pipes coming from the individual cylinders. These are the runners. And as they come down, they combine into a bigger pipe. So for here, you have 4 of these runners. These 2 combine into this one. These 2 combine into this one. So you have 4 pipes down to 2, thus 4-to-2. And typically, in looking at it from this angle, it looks like they combine again into 1, and that's where 4-to-1 comes in, or 4-to-1, where they all just join in the same exact place. However, on our cars, we have a bit of a different setup on these 4.3 liters. These actually stay as individual pipes all the way into the point where it separates into a new pipe, which actually is the catalytic converter, which I'll go over momentarily. So it's a weird thing, but it's just one of those odd things I wanted to get out of the way. This is technically a 4-to-2 header. If you go aftermarket, you're going to end up with a 4-to-2-to-1 or a 4-to-1 exhaust manifold. So the reason why it's hard to justify this on a 4.3 liter is because you're not going to get a whole lot of power. You do get more performance. Let me make that very clear. You're going to get more performance, and that is because, one, you're going to reduce weight. I think I dropped about 9 pounds going from these exhaust manifolds to the ones I got from Velocity AP. So there is the weight benefit there, and weight does continue to add up. Those weight losses add up, and you do get a noticeable difference in performance as you continue to lose weight. The other thing is the exhaust pulses. So as you can see, these are unequal length before they meet up in this collector here. And the reason is because this is done for fitment. It's a good design, but it isn't ideal. If you think of how many times the engine is rotating, revolving per second, because you've got 3,000 RPMs, which is revolutions per minute, that's 50 per second. All those gases have to go somewhere, and that is through these pipes. When these exhaust gases first go, this one's going to go through nice and quick. This one has to travel further, but because these aren't equal length, they're going to overlap in this spot. When that happens, there's turbulence, and when there's turbulence here, the next pulses can't get through cleanly, and so you have this basically a backup here where the gases aren't able to flow through smoothly. When you make a switch to an equal length header, you no longer have that section where it can overlap because they go through in turn. You don't have to worry about the unequal length causing overlap. They just go through as their turn comes up. So that's where you get the performance from an equal length header. So yes, you can. The hard part about, saying, do you want to get this or should I get this is, well, it depends on what you want to do with your car. I'm keeping my 4.3 liter. I've got some big plans for it, and obviously I've done a ton of work to it, so it's kind of a moot point to switch to a 4.7. The easiest way to get more power out of a V8 Vantage is to get the 4.7 if you have a 4.3 liter. You get all the benefits of a newer car, you get a bigger engine, you get the torque, you get a bit, you get more horsepower, you have all those benefits. If you want to keep the 4.3 liter, which to me is just, it's a fun engine, it revs a little bit better on the high end because of the way the cylinders are set up. I can't remember exactly how the best way to describe it. I remember seeing some really good write-ups about it, but basically it's a fun engine. There's nothing wrong with it. And, as you start modifying the car, you get a lot of power out of it. But on the 4.7 liter, this is a much more advantageous part to replace because those cars have a big catalytic converter built in to the exhaust manifold, and that is done for cold start emissions. The closer the catalytic converter is to the engine, the quicker it heats up. The quicker it heats up, the more efficiently it's able to convert those gases to be less harmful. Emissions are getting more and more stringent. So cold start emissions is one of the areas that have to be focused on, which is why the newer cars have the catalytic converter built into here. They have a secondary one as well that's still in the same spot, but they also have this one here. The V12 engines have that catalytic converter in the exhaust manifold as well. So on the 4.7 liter V8 and the V12 engines, you get a lot of power by replacing exhaust manifolds for ones that don't have catalytic converters built in. So if you want to lose some pounds, you want to get some more performance out of your 4.3 liter, go for it. It's expensive. It's a pain in the butt to install, but you do get more performance out of it. If you have a 4.7 liter or a V12, you're going to get a lot more power potential from that part than you will a 4.3 liter. So moving on, we have the catalytic converter. Like I said, this is the first thing that I recommend people change. And the reason is because it's easy to install. It's got 3 studs. That one came out. Doesn't really matter because I replaced them with another cat with bolts instead. But it's got 3 studs and a slip fitting on the back. You have to loosen a mid pipe, which is the one that connects to the rear of the catalytic converter, so that it can push out of the way so that you can pull the studs out of here. Pretty easy. You also have 2 O2 sensors. You have an upstream and a downstream, and I have them sitting right here to make it nice and easy. What this does is it creates, it contains a filtration medium called a catalyst that reduces the amount of harmful emissions coming from your exhaust. When it comes to emissions, this is the piece that does it. The first O2 sensor, the upstream one, measures the gases that are coming into the catalytic converter, the CAT for short, which is I'm going to say now because I talk too much anyway. The second one takes another measurement, but what it does is it sends that to the computer to be compared against the original one. So the difference in readings from the first to the second sensor says how well this catalyst is doing its job. If there isn't much of a difference, then it's going to say, well, this isn't really doing much of that catalyzing to make it less harmful, so there's some issue here. It may be that you have a bad O2 sensor, which is usually the front one because it's getting the brunt of the heat and the nastiness that's coming out of the engine, so it tends to fail more often, and actually fairly often. So if you get catalytic converter inefficiency warnings, it's usually because of this sensor. But it's telling the computer, well, it's either running, it's catalyzing and reducing emissions properly, or it's not. The reason you can switch this out from a 600 cell cat, which is what this is, it's basically the amount of catalyst material in there, 600 cell, it's just an easy way to keep track of that, down to a 200 cell, which is a third as much of the catalyst material, is because look at where these sensors are located. This one is at the beginning right here. This one is only about a third of the way down the catalyst. So you can see this much material versus that much material. It's right in an early spot in the catalyst. You still have a lot of catalyzing and cleaning being done after the sensor, but the computer doesn't know this exists because it's only checking this far. When you get a 200 cell cat, you're going to have the catalyst material right here doing the same job. You're just not going to have the extra that's continuing after being metered. So if you do change out for a 200 cell cat, you shouldn't be, as long as it's a quality catalyst, because if you get a crappy one, the catalyst material isn't going to be very good, so it's not going to do a good job. That's why you want to make sure you get a good one. But basically, it's metering the same amount of catalyst that's there. So when you change out the cat for a 200 one, or a high flow cat is what's also called, or race cat, depending on, it's whatever terminology anybody wants to use. It's all marketing. It's basically just a smaller catalyst material for the pipe. You have less restriction because there's less to go through. And you have a quicker transition, especially if it's got a nice transition back to being nice and smooth. You can see the shapes do matter on these. There's been a lot of studies on that, but that's all here or there. It's not going to affect it as much on our cars as it will on something like a turbocharged car where the gases are flying through, or a race car where the gases are flying through a lot faster. But basically, anyway, I'm kind of rambling. I tell people to replace these because 1, you don't have any emissions lights. 2, it's easy to install. 3, it's one of the less expensive things you can do. It's the cheapest part of the exhaust system that matters. And it's, like I said, it's easy to install. I think it typically takes about an hour and a half, including getting the car on jack stands and then off jack stands, start to finish. You can do it in about an hour and a half. The O2 sensors, while I'm sitting here, are different lengths. There are I know some people that are colorblind, so just to keep that in mind, if you can't tell that this is green and this is blue, these cords are a different length. So if you do get these mixed up, you're not sure which is which, just remember that the shorter length is the front one, the longer length is the rear one. When you're underneath the car, you're going to see that there are green and blue connectors. So the green one goes in the green one, the blue one goes in the blue one. If you can't tell the difference between the green and blue, just remember that, well, you don't even have to remember anything. You're going to see that the connectors are up here, and the upstream one only has to go this far, the downstream one has to go further. So lay them out, and you'll see that the downstream has a much longer cord to accommodate the further length. I do package these, and they do say which one is which, so it's easy to remember if you do have that set up. But once you're in the car, it's actually not too bad. It's not hard to forget. I don't have a muffler sitting out here because, 1, that would have been a pain in the butt, and 2, when it comes to changing out the exhaust system, the muffler is going to give you a great benefit for reducing weight. It's also going to change the sound of the car, so it's very subjective. As far as power, you're only going to get 3 to 5 horsepower typically from it. I'm going to have another video talking about exhaust, the muffler, but on this one I just wanted to go over these 2 pieces because they're the pieces that I get the most questions on. I'm about to send these off to a company I work very closely for a lot of my parts, so I'm going to have my own coming to market hopefully in the next few months. But if you have any questions about these or anything else, please feel free to reach out, rich@redpants.lol, or the contact page of my website, www.redpants.lol.